Hey everyone, it is February, so it's time to do our Gnome of the Month for February. I am going to start out just by sketching out the nose like I always do. And then I will place his little hat right on top of there. And decide which way I want it to curve. I'm going to go to the left this time. I think last month's was curved over to the right. Sketch that out and then sketch out the beard. And I'm thinking for this one, I'll have him hold a heart for Valentine's Day. So I'll just sketch that there. And then paint some, or sketch some hands there, kind of holding that. And then I think I want his body to be just a little bit longer than that. And then some little feet there. So that's going to be just kind of like the top of a shoe. And then I'll go back through and erase, like fully erase the lines that I don't need. And then lighten up the rest of them. So, then I've got a couple of colors picked out there. Actually, I'm going to go ahead and let those start getting reactivated. These are both from Watercolor, which I will put all of the supplies and stuff in the description. This pink one is called Gypsy, and the red is called Ariel. I don't know if I'll use both of them or either of them, so I am just going to kind of wing it. Ooh, maybe this one will give some sparkly red shoes. I think I will. Alright. And then I'm really going to lighten up the hat, because especially if I go with a really light color, I want to make sure that the pencil marks don't show through there. And definitely lighten up the nose. So a lot of times I almost lighten up the lines a little too much and I really can't see it. But I would rather have that than have the lines show through. And sometimes for me it's more about just making sure I can fit everything on the page like I think. And then I do like to add just a smidge of pink in there. But that pink is so strong that it really takes over the peach color. Mix a little bit of that in there and just add a little bit of variation there. I think for that part that it's holding, I'm going to go with a really light sort of peachy pink, or I mean purpley pink. I always have dog hair on my paintbrushes, I feel like. Dog hair everywhere. And I try to, before I start anything, as I wet my paints down to get started, I try to pick the little pieces of dog hair out of there, but it doesn't matter. I still always wind up with some. And I close the palette after I'm done with it. So I don't know, there's just dog hair everywhere. This paper again is not 100% cotton, so with those that are not, you do have to work just a little bit faster than you would with the cotton paper. But I think this one has a pretty good dry time. It gives you some time to work with it, I find anyway. Okay, and then we'll let that dry before I paint anything else that's touching that section so that it doesn't bleed into it. I think I am gonna do that red for the shoes, and I'm gonna use a different brush just so that I don't get super sparkly color in my other paints and on that paintbrush. So if you've watched some of my other videos, you've seen me talk about with some of these handmade watercolors, especially if they're shimmery or have glitter in them, you do need to let them sit a little longer to reactivate. And when it gets that really a little bit thicker consistency to it, that's kind of the sweet spot for me for it, because you're going to have really good coverage then. So that's why I always try to wet those before I really get started, to give them plenty of time to reactivate. You're just going to get the best coverage out of your paints that way. There are a ton of shops on Etsy that sell handmade watercolors, and a lot of them have even gotten off of Etsy now and moved more to their own website setup. If you start following people over on Instagram, you'll see some of the different watercolor makers out there, and I've gotten some really amazing paints just by watching that and shopping from them. It's just fun for me. So none of these that I'm using are paints that they've sent to me or anything like that. These are all paints that I purchased with my money, so any opinions are solely mine as far as how they work. But these are just beautiful. You can get some shades that you can't always find in a more traditional watercolor. And then let's move on to mittens. And I'm going to use a little bit of a smaller brush for that, just because I like to have that control a little bit more. And I want them to be a little bit darker than the heart, but I also don't want to overtake anything else. So let's go with purple, because why not, right? It's gonna have purple mittens. I'm just going to try to even that out a little bit. I am by no means a watercolor expert. I am still very much a beginner, but if you can get the paint to lay in a more even wash on your paper, you'll have less of those weird blooms, which are sometimes a really desired effect, don't get me wrong, but something that happens especially on lower quality papers. But if you can get it in sort of an even wash instead of having it really pooling to one side or the other, you'll get a better look out of that. So what color should we go with for the rest of him? I think I'm going to do pink for the hat, this gypsy pink, and then I think maybe I'll go back and add like some polka dots or something with the red there. I use 2 separate dishes of watercolor, especially when I'm using glittery or shimmery paints, just so that I don't cross-contaminate with some of those shimmery shades. So you can see in that one how it's got a really thick consistency to it. I will use some of the water out of there just to re-wet, to add a little bit more water to that so I don't add the red sparkle to the pink. That's almost too dry now. That is more me and learning some of these brushes than anything else. It's not at all the quality of the paint, but you can see there now, after I dipped my brush in water more, how much thinner that is. So it would look like that the paint doesn't have good coverage, but that is not a detail of the paint at all. I mean, watercolor traditionally should be a fairly transparent medium anyway, but for me, when I'm using these metallic shades and things of that nature, I want it to be more of a full coverage. And one, you'll get that the best on black paper, but you can see just there how much difference there is in the coverage of that once it's a little bit of a thicker consistency to it. So it's a little bit more pigment, less water. You can also go back and do it in layers. You know, once this is dry, add another layer on top of it. This one is almost a little bit of a duochrome in that some spots in certain lights it looks a little bit purple, but mostly a really pretty pink. Alright, so that's kind of a first layer down there. I want to get a little bit more of the pigment dropped in on this one, on the hat. as that sits there and gets a little bit thicker and reactivates a little bit better. I probably could have put even more water on that and let that settle a bit. But we'll let that dry and come back to it if we need to. Or I may just add some, like I said, some little red polka dots or something and call it good. Okay, that little heart kind of dried down to almost look a little bit purple, but that's okay. I'm going to use that same pink and a little bit more with more pigment to it for the arms and the rest of the body. And then I'll probably go back and add some other detail to the arms, maybe some stripes or something, just so that they stand out a little bit more from the body. Actually, I'm going to leave the arms white for now. Then we go back in with a little bit of a darker shade for them. Now, as usual, I have kind of painted myself into a corner here with what I can and can't paint next until things are dry. Because now the hat's wet and the body's wet, so I can't really paint the beard until that's dry. That's okay. I'm going to go back and add some details in some other areas while we wait for those to dry. And again, since this side had dried rather quickly, I'm just re-wetting that down a little bit to give it a little bit more of a solid coverage to that side. And I want to straighten this up a little bit by the feet so it doesn't look like his feet are floating, or he's floating on top of the feet. Okay. Now I'm going to wait again for that to dry before I start trying to paint on arms so that it doesn't bleed into that. So I'm going to take a little bit of this darker pink and thin that out some and go just around the top of this heart here to make just a little extra detail. Actually, I think I'm going to do it just on that one side. So it kind of looks like a little bit of a shadow there. Very subtle, but pretty nonetheless. And then I'm going to take one of the brushes that I use for lettering and write out love on the little heart with a red. notice when I go back and watch some of my videos to edit stuff, a lot of the times when I'm lettering, you guys probably can't really see what I'm doing very well because I hold my brush mostly vertical. One of these days I'll try to get a little bit better set up so you can see a little bit better what I do, but for now this is what I have to work with. So I try to move my hand when I remember to, or when I can, because otherwise things wind up looking rather wonky if it's painted in a way that I don't usually paint. I'm not used to filming myself for sure. There's still just a little bit here on the hat where it's kind of still wet, so I'm waiting on that to dry just a little bit more before I start on the beard, but this part's dry, so I can add that little bit darker color. Actually, I think what I'm going to do is just mix that purple, or mix some of that pink in with the purple. To be kind of a little bit of a happy medium between the mitten color and the body color. Add just a little bit more purple. Actually, I'm going to use this darker. A little too much, but it's all good. Purple is way darker. That's more what I was going for, not quite as dark as that. And then for the beard, I tend to start with just a wash of the gray, and then I'll go back and add some other details. You can see this paper does buckle quite a bit. It wouldn't do that quite as much if I had, I guess you can wet the back of it down some and then tape it down and let it dry. I have not tried that with this paper because frankly it doesn't really bother me all that much. And taping it down works for me sometimes if I can tape it to a surface that I can also move, if that makes sense. Like a lot of times I'll use the backing from one of the pads of paper to tape it down to, so I can still rotate the painting by rotating the whole thing. If I tape it down to the table, I can't do that. And I do tend to rotate my paper around a lot just to get the angles that I am most comfortable painting at. this is kind of another one of those areas where the fact that this paper is not 100% cotton, so it does dry rather quickly, is a little bit harder to work with when you're painting something like this where you want to go back and add a lot of detail to, but you're also painting around some areas where you can't go super quick with it. It does make it more challenging for sure. But it's all just about fun to me anyway, so. So right now I'm just kind of going through and wetting certain areas there that were kind of dry. It's probably a little bit hard to see on the camera, but from the angle that I'm at, I can see pretty well where the paper's still wet and where the shine is on the paper. So that's what I'm looking for before I go back in with another darker shade of gray, which I usually mix a little bit of this, like, I don't know if it's an indigo or if it's a Payne's gray, but I do have, this paint palette did not come with a swatch card, but I made my own. Let me know if you guys are interested to see that, just so I would know like what the names of the colors were, if I really liked it, if I wanted to order, you know, if I used up a certain color, if I needed to order another one, I would know what it was called. There are numbers on the sides of the pans too, so there's that. But so now I'm just taking that gray blue mix and making some little lines in there while that paint is still wet so that it will bleed some. Got a little bit on the mitten there that I didn't really mean to, but so this just gives it a little bit more dimension. And then after that dries down, I'll go back and add a little bit more color to that. So now that that's all dry, this is still just a little bit wet, and you can kind of tell that by the buckling of the paper. Like it doesn't look wet or feel wet, but you can see I've got that pink on my thumb where I touched it. So I'm gonna let that dry just a little bit and I will be back. Okay, I think everything is good and dry now. So first thing I'm gonna do is add just a little bit more color to the nose and straighten it out just a little bit. I got a little bit of the gray in there too, so I like to add just a little bit more color. To the nose, and then I'm going to take a liner brush actually and a little bit of this darker shade now that's been sitting there and add some just faint or skinny lines to the beard. I've been trying to push myself to play with some different brushes. I ordered some from Jerry's, I don't know, a couple of months back. So I've been testing out some different brushes to see what works for me and to see what I like. The Princeton Aqua Elite right now by far my favorite of the ones that I do have. I just really like the way they work. This one is a Mimic size 1 rigger, and I've used it for quite a few other things and I really like it too. This one is super, I don't know, flippy, I guess. I don't know how to describe it, but nonetheless, And then I want to take some of this red and add some more details to the hat. I think I'm going to add just a little heart here at the end, like it would be like a pom-pom on the end of the hat there. And then I think I'll just add some polka dots and let that dry. Now, because I'm leaving these fairly thick with a lot of water, it will probably take some time to dry, but that's okay. I have yet to put my heat tool in this room. I think I'm going to switch offices anyway. So I haven't moved my heat tool in here yet. It's in my other room, but eventually I might get there. Alright. It's alright. I used the wrong water, but it's okay because I think I'm done painting for now anyway. Actually, I'm going to straighten this up just a little bit here on the side where between the body and the arm. Just a smidge. I don't know if you guys can hear that, but that would be my dog whining because she can't come in. Now, because I put that color again on this side, it's going to give it a little bit more of a shadow effect on this one side, but I am okay with that. So again, a lot of times with this lower quality paper, I'll add some details like that and then go back in with a nearly dry brush just to sort of soften that edge there so you don't wind up with a hard edge. All right, and I think that he's done. So let me know what you guys think. I really would appreciate it if you like my artwork, if you would subscribe, give this video a like, and give me a comment on what you think I should do for March.